So it's great to be here with everyone today. I have till 2 o'clock. So at 2, I have another meeting that was scheduled that I have to attend. So we'll go till 2, and I want to share about the situation that we're dealing with now, and the unfortunate tragedy of the murder of George Floyd, and I'll save it for the end because I want to focus on today's class, and then I think there's an important message that even from today's class itself that we could take from this and the lessons that we can learn. So um, in 1977, the Rebbe had a really um, strong heart attack. And I talked about this in one of the earlier classes. It was Simchas Torah when everyone's dancing in 770, dancing with the Torahs. It was packed. It was amazing energy in the room. And then they sensed that the Rebbe was having a very difficult time, and the Rebbe had to sit down. And they cleared the whole 770. That everyone left, like thousands of people left right away because to make sure the Rebbe could get fresh air. Some people even broke windows to make sure to get more fresh air in the room because they knew that the Rebbe was suffering from something. The Rebbe actually ended up getting up and dancing more when the 770 was practically empty. Only a few people were there. And later they realized that the Rebbe suffered a massive heart attack. And it was actually amazing that the Rebbe was even able to continue the dancing after what the Rebbe was going through. Dr. Ira Weiss is a cardiologist from Chicago. Actually, my mother-in-law's cardiologist, and because she's had some heart problems, and he's a very famous doctor in Chicago. And he later said, when he shares the whole story, because he flew in from Chicago to be there with the Rebbe, because he was a top cardiologist. That the Rebbe's recovery after that was remarkable. To see the recovery after such a massive heart attack was something which he never experienced before. And that was in 1977. The Rebbe passed away in 1992. And the Rebbe had a doctor. His name was Dr. Feldman, a local doctor in Crown Heights. And Dr. Feldman, when he came to the Rebbe's room after the Rebbe had the heart attack, he shared with the Rebbe that the joy of the holiday was continuing, and he said the two Hebrew words of Shira v'Zimra. Shira v'Zimra is joy and song and joy, and letting the Rebbe know that the festivities of the holiday were still going on, and he thought that the Rebbe would appreciate this, to know that it's the Hasidim are still being joyful and not being sad by what the Rebbe is going through. And actually, the Rebbe's response was so positive that he realized that the Rebbe really, appreciated these words. And on multiple times, the Rebbe would repeat these words of Shira v'Zimra to make sure that everyone should know that he didn't want that his heart attack should affect the mood of the holiday, that it's the holiday and it's so easy to get depressed and down by the fact that the Rebbe suffers such a great heart attack, but that the joy should continue. Number of years later, after the Rebbe recovered, thankfully, but a number of years later, it was on Simchas Torah again, and Rabbi Feldman was in 770, and he was carrying one of the Torahs when they were dancing with the Torahs, and he got to a point that he felt like he was going to faint because it was just the crowds, and he describes that someone was jumping on his head. I mean, if you would know 770 and how packed it was, it was like a stadium, like being at a concert, with in the front of the concert, trying to be there and to be as close as possible to experience the joy of the holiday. So he was literally about to faint, and the Rebbe noticed him, and the Rebbe told him to come up to where the Rebbe was standing at the front of the synagogue on the platform. So everyone pushed him to the front and helped him get up, and he got up. And the Rebbe said to him, how do you like my medicine, right? And it actually really revived him, because he realized what the Rebbe is telling him is that his medicine, the Rebbe's medicine, is the joy this joy is what really brought the Rebbe back alive. That even after suffering such a difficult heart attack, a massive heart attack, that he was so that it was the joy and seeing the joy of his Hasidim, of his followers and students and disciples, that they were continuing with this joy, that brought tremendous joy and satisfaction to the Rabbi. So that brought tremendous joy and satisfaction to the Rabbi. So later, in 1992, when the Rebbe had a stroke again, the Rebbe passed away in 1994. The Rebbe had a very big stroke in 1992. After the Rebbe had the stroke, when he turned to Dr. Feldman, he kept telling Dr. Feldman the same Hebrew words of joy and dancing, or joy and song, right? Shira v'zimra, to continue with the joy and song. That was, and at first he was like, 1 second, is the Rebbe saying, like, maybe he's misunderstanding the Rebbe because it was after the Rebbe had a stroke. But the Rebbe kept saying it again and again to him, and he realized that what the Rebbe was telling him is that the most important thing is to continue with the joy. It's, imagine, your Rebbe, who you look up to so much, suffers a heart attack, a stroke. It's debilitating. It's so hard to see. It's like a parent going through something like that. And the Rebbe, a spiritual leader, to see him going through something like that, it's so easy to be downcast from it, to be saddened by it. And the Rebbe's message is that no, we have to continue the joy. That was the Rebbe's message. So today we're going to talk about the oi, or the joy, right? The ultimate cure. It's interesting, that in Judaism we have the two extremes. We have the oi and we have the joy. And where does it really come from? So we're going to give a little history, some interesting things. That what is the role of joy in Judaism? Okay, so for many years the motivational reward, not just in Judaism but in the world, was reward and punishment, right? It was all about reward and punishment. And even in Judaism, this idea was very prevalent, to the extent that when the Alter Rebbe was put in prison because of his opponents, Jewish opponents who opposed the teachings of Chabad in Russia, when he was interrogated, one of the things that they interrogated him about and said is that the accusations against him is that the Alter Rebbe promotes joy at all times, to always be joyful. And they were claiming that this was changing Judaism, or just a craziness. How can you promote joy at all times? What is this nonsense, right? How can you be joyful at all times? And it's interesting to note that it used to be seen as that most people would say that you should be joyful when you're serving God, right? If you're doing a mitzvah, for example, there's a Hebrew saying, Simcha shel mitzvah, the joy of a mitzvah. That when you do a mitzvah, you should do it joyfully, right? Or serve Hashem with joy. Ivdu et Hashem v'simcha. Serve Hashem with joy. This was a very common thing. But to say that to serve Hashem with joy is not just when you're doing a mitzvah, but all the time to be joyful, at all times to be joyful, this was a radical change for most Jews. But this is precisely what the Baal Shem Tov came to teach. This wasn't something which was instituted by the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, who's actually an extreme intellectual and wrote the book of Tanya. But it was started by the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the entire Hasidic movement. And he said that there's a teaching that says, Kol ma'asecha yu l'shem shemayim, that everything that you do should be for the sake of heaven. Meaning not just when we go to the synagogue, not just when we do a mitzvah, but actually you could connect all the time. At any moment you can connect to Hashem. Whatever you're doing, you can find a connection. Whether you're walking in the street, you're walking in the woods, you're going to the store, you're brushing your teeth, you're going to sleep, in everything that you're doing, you can find a connection. And therefore, the Baal Shem Tov said that really in every part of our lives, we should be joyful because we're always connecting. And even more than that, actually, what the Baal Shem Tov taught is that joy itself, for no reason whatsoever, is beneficial. That the joy itself has tremendous power to it. and that it has the greatest effect on above. Like I mentioned last week at the end of the class, there's a saying that says, "Da mala ma'ala mimcha." Know that which is above you. So the Baal Shem Tov said, don't just read it as know that which is above you, which literally means remember there's a God above you, but actually that it's coming to tell us that know that everything that happens above comes from you, that you make your own reality. And what we're going to talk about today is this idea. It's called the observer's effect. It's actually an idea I believe it's quantum physics. This idea that the way you perceive something, that's the reality that it becomes, how you look at it. There's even an amazing book, I know Bert has it in his office. It's a book that actually shows that drops of water that were frozen and the energy that was around that drop of water before it was frozen. For example, if it was an energy of love or hate, or the music that was played, if it was really beautiful loving music, or the opposite, and how it had an effect on these frozen drops of water and the way that they looked. And it's a whole book that documents it and these pictures. But this idea really started from the Baal Shem Tov, who stated that joy is a way of life. It was even some Hasidim, I think they were of the Baal Shem Tov, who used to say that people who are, I shared a story last week, I think it was last week with Elijah the prophet, who said, he's going to show someone who's going to get for sure a portion of heaven, and at the end, it wasn't the scholar and it wasn't this. Who was it? It was the two jokesters in the marketplace that were lifting people's spirits up. So they used to say, these Chassidim of the Baal Shem Tov used to say that actually, they said, why is it that these people they're so joyful, they're so full of life, and they don't even serve God, they're not even doing anything holy? Why do they have it so good? And the answer is, and what they would explain is that it doesn't even matter. The reality is that joy brings blessings. Now, we could use those blessings for good things, and of course we should use it to serve God and so on and so forth, but the joy itself has this power that we bring, it's like a magnet. When we're joyful, we bring joyful things into our lives. And this is the way the Rebbe saw it. That even after he had a heart attack, all the Rebbe could think about and all the Rebbe wanted is that there should be continued joy. And why? Because the Rebbe understood that the joy itself is the anecdote. Sometimes we think that, you know what, this is a difficult situation, this is so hard, but I should be joyful anyways, right? If we have the strength to do that, right? I should find the joy. Meaning it's despite the challenges, we're joyful. But today what we're going to focus on is actually that joy is the anecdote. Joy is what brings the blessings. And the Rebbe understood that, and the Rebbe taught us that when we're faced with challenges in our own lives, when the Rebbe was faced with the greatest heart attack that he had in his life, the Rebbe's message was that we have to continue with joy. We have to continue with the holiday, continue with blessings. Why? Because that itself is going to be his medicine. That is the medicine in life. Joy is the medicine, and that's why he told Dr. Feldman, and he said, do you appreciate my medicine? How do you appreciate my medicine? So there was a story, one of the stories for today. It's brought in the book, Positivity Bias, and it's a story of the Mittler Rebbe, the second Chabad Rebbe. He was known as the Mittler Rebbe because it means middle Rebbe. So even though we had many more Rebbes afterwards, he became known as the middle Rebbe. When in Chabad we had the third Rebbe, he became known as the middle Rebbe. His name was Rabbi Dovie, the same name as mine. Rabbi Dovie, and his last name was Shnei Uri, which eventually there was also the name Schneerson in the family, but Rabbi Dovie Shnei Uri. So known as the Mittler Rebbe, which means in Yiddish the middle Rebbe. So he had a group of Chassidim. One group was the group of Chassidim that was the choir. In Chabad, there's a very big tradition of singing and melodies, and there's even books. There's a book that documents, I believe it's 300 Chabad nigunim, Chabad melodies that were composed throughout the 7 generations of Chabad. Many of them are very joyful melodies, and many of them are very introspective melodies that are very, that really go deep inside of yourself. And people who are experts in song and nigunim, they really, the Chabad nigunim are the deepest of all of the nigunim. You have many Hasidim, but the Chabad nigunim are known to be very deep. They're very deep and very joyful. So the Mittler Rebbe, he had a choir, and this choir would come together on very special occasions, and they would lead the singing. So that was one group of Hasidim. Then he had another group of Hasidim. It may sound surprising, but they were a group that would do tricks on horses. Okay, this was back in Russia, and they were very talented horseback riders, and they were trained in doing special tricks. And on special occasions, not on Shabbat or the holidays, they would also perform, and they would do these tricks, again, a way to lift up people's spirits. So there was one time that and the Rebbe's son, he had a son, his name was Nachum, Reb Nachum. He was one of the horsemen, okay, one of the sons of the Rebbe, the Mitzvah Rebbe. He was one of the horsemen who was trained in doing these tricks. So one day the Mitzvah Rebbe requested, it was an ordinary day, and he requested that they should come together, and the choir and the horsemen should both perform. And this was very rare. It hardly ever happened that they would both perform at the same time. And it never happened unless it was a special day. It was only a special occasion. In Chabad, you have certain days of the year that are, we celebrate, we commemorate something very special that happened. But this was an ordinary day, and no one understood why, what's going on. But they started to perform, and in the middle of the performance, the Mittler Rebbe was on his balcony, and he was watching the whole thing happening. And it was sort of like, big courtyard area. And suddenly, the son of the Rabbi, Reb Nachum, who was a horseback rider, he fell off of his horse, and the situation seemed really bad. It seemed like he was really, really hurt. And a lot of people, gathered around, but the Mittler Rebbe right away requested, he made with the hand motion that they should continue the celebration. And the Hasidim knew if the Mittler Rebbe said to continue the celebration, they continued it right away. And a few people tended to the son of the Mittler Rebbe, but the Mittler Rebbe himself did not go to his son. And they continued the celebrations. It was extremely joyful, and even more than it was in the beginning. That Mittler Rebbe made, encouraged that it should be extremely joyful time. Afterwards, they realized that what happened to the Mittler Rebbe's son really wasn't too bad. I think he broke a leg. But it wasn't as bad as they initially thought. They thought that maybe he was paralyzed or something. It was really a scary moment when he fell off the horse. So the Hasidim later came to the Mittler Rebbe and asked the Mittler Rebbe and said, "How is it that you were not worried about your son when your son fell off the horse, and you encouraged everyone to continue being joyful?" Now they didn't ask this in a disrespectful way. They understood that the Mittler Rebbe, if he says this, there's obviously something, there's something going on over there that we don't understand. So the Mittler Rebbe explained like this, something amazing story. He said that actually, this morning when I woke up, I saw that there was a decree in heaven against my son, and something terrible was going to happen to him, something really bad. And I knew that the only way to change this, decree is, in Hebrew it's called the Gezerah in heaven, the only way is to combat it through joy. And that's why I had gathered everyone here today to bring joy. And him falling off the horse was actually nothing compared to what was going to happen. And not just that, continuing the joy even after he fell, I understood and I knew that this joy is going to make that even the fall itself isn't going to be so bad. And at the end, it wasn't so bad. But the Mittler Rebbe taught them this amazing lesson, and it's really one of the stories in Chabad that's passed down, because every story, a story is not just a story. Every story has a lesson. You watch a movie, you watch something. Hopefully, there's a message, there's a positive message, there's a takeaway. So the same thing is with every story in Chabad that's been passed down, especially stories that the Rebbes themselves have shared or we experience with the Rebbes. There's a lesson. there's a lesson to be learned. And the lesson over here to be learned is the power of joy, the power of celebrating, the power of being positive, that we have this ability ourselves to change our own fate. We have the ability to change our fate. If we only understood this, if we understand this idea that how much power we are given, it's really an unbelievable thing. There was once someone who came to the Rabbi, and so I just want to give a little context for a moment, because in Chabad, and really by Hasidim in general, as I mentioned earlier, it's important to realize that joy, how important joy is, but also realize that just because joy is so important, it doesn't take away from other things. For example, the idea of sincerity. Sincerity is a characteristic that in Chabad and by Hasidim, starting from the Baal Shem Tov, it was a very important concept, right? To be altruistic, very important idea. The idea of also sincerity and even tears, right? To cry about something which is real, that you really feel painful. And we know many stories of this. For example, there's a story of the Baal Shem Tov synagogue on Rosh Hashanah. One year, the Baal Shem Tov would each year ask someone else to blow the shofar. One of the great leaders in the community, great sages, great rabbis in the community. And one year he asked a certain individual to blow the shofar. I think, I'll tell you his name in a moment. That year it was Reb Zev. Zev, which is a Hebrew name, it means wolf. He was one of the great spiritual leaders in the community, and he was asked to blow the shofar by the Baal Shem Tov himself. And when we blow the shofar every year on Rosh Hashanah, it's not just we blow the shofar, but actually Kabbalah explains that there are spiritual intentions that we should have when we blow the shofar. Each sound that we blow, we have certain intentions in mind. So that year, Reb Zev, he felt a great obligation. If the Baal Shem Tov wanted him to blow the shofar, then obviously he took it very seriously. So he prepared for many months, studying the Kabbalah, studying the deeper secrets of the Torah, and especially connected to the blowing of the shofar, so that when he blows the shofar, he should approach it with the greatest intention. And you should know that when we blow the shofar every year on Rosh Hashanah, it actually breaks the decrees above. The sound of the shofar, even if there's certain negativity that's supposed to come to the Jewish people or individual lives, that blowing of the shofar to the world, really, the blowing of the shofar has this ability to break all boundaries, because it's like the cry of a child. And when a parent hears their child cry, even though maybe the parent is upset, or maybe the parent is aggravated about something that the child did, when they hear that pure cry of the child, when they see that sweet face that breaks down in tears, the heart melts and they give in to their child. It's the same thing actually with Hashem, that on Rosh Hashanah, when we blow the shofar, when Hashem hears the cry of the shofar, it's like Hashem hears the cry of his children, and it has this ability to break all the decrees. But again, there's many beautiful intentions that we have when we blow the shofar. So Reb Zev prepared all these intentions this year, and he actually made notes for himself. There was a lot to remember, so he made notes for himself that as he's blowing the shofar, he could look at this piece of paper and remember the different intentions that he should have at different times of the shofar blowing. He prepared this note and he puts it in his pocket, and on Rosh Hashanah he goes to the synagogue. On Rosh Hashanah you're allowed to carry outside. So he goes and he comes to the synagogue, and it comes the time to blow the shofar. He gets called up to the bima, and he's ready to blow the shofar, and he puts his hands in his pocket to take out this piece of paper, and he can't find the paper. And he feels terrible. He thinks to himself, oh, I prepared all this time, I don't have the paper. And he was devastated. But everyone was waiting for him to blow the shofar, so he goes ahead and he blows the shofar. At the end of the shofar blowing, the end of services, the end of the davening, the prayers that Rosh Hashanah, the Baal Shem Tov comes over to him, and the Baal Shem Tov is moved to no end. And he says, your shofar blowing this year was the greatest shofar blowing we ever experienced. We had many people blow the shofar, but something about the way you blew the shofar was unbelievable. And he said, it must have been your great intentions that you had. So the Reb Zev tells the Baal Shem Tov, he says, actually, to tell you the truth, I feel terrible because I prepared so many great intentions, but I was so flustered because I went to look for my paper right before the shofar blowing and I couldn't find my paper. It's like, imagine you have to give a huge speech in front of, a massive audience and your notes are gone. So he says, I was so flustered that I was just broken the whole time. The whole time I was just brokenhearted from what happened. And I felt terrible that I let everyone down. So the Baal Shem Tov heard what he had to say, and he says, aha, now I understand why this year's shofar blowing was the greatest shofar blowing from all the other years. Because every other year, everyone approached it with their mind. Right? Each one had this intention and that intention, which is a beautiful thing and it's important. But this year, when you blew the shofar with a broken heart. And he said there's many gates in heaven. There's a gate, for this, and there's a gate for that, for success and parnasa, livelihood, and there's a one for health, and there's another one for children, all the gates in heaven. And he says each gate has another key. But there's one key that opens up all the gates in heaven. And that's the key of a broken heart. The key of a broken heart has the ability to open up all the gates in heaven. But the Baal Shem Tov, so this is a story of the Baal Shem Tov to show you how sincerity and a broken heart on one hand is a big ideal in Judaism, and especially by Hasidim and Chabad. That meaning that we take things to heart. We don't just take it lightly. We don't just show up on Yom Kippur and we're all joyful and meaning there's a sense of the day and the importance of it and so on. But with all of that, the Baal Shem Tov later said that if tears are the key to open up the heavenly gates, joy absolutely demolishes them. Meaning not just, you can have the key to open the door and get in, and you slowly open the heavy gates. Joy has this ability to break all the gates open. And in Hebrew, there's a Hebrew word for it, and it's brought down by all the sages and many places in the Torah, in the teachings, is that simcha poretz geder. Simcha breaks all boundaries. When we are joyful, we have this amazing ability to break all boundaries. And the Rebbe this was also a message that the Rebbe would tell a lot of people when they were faced with a lot of difficulties and they felt it was insurmountable. The Rebbe would say, Simcha poretz geder. Simcha breaks all barriers. There was once during a private audience, there was someone who was by the Rebbe. This is another story brought in the book Positivity Bias. And he expressed certain negativity and pessimism. And the Rebbe stood up and he goes to the shelf and he takes out a Zohar, the book of Kabbalah, the founding book of Kabbalah. And he opens it up right away to a page. On the page, it says like this. And I'll read. Tachaz, come and see, come and observe. Our world is always ready to receive the spiritual flow that emanates from above. Like I explained, that there's always an energy coming down to this world from above. The upper world provides in accordance with the state below. If the state below is joyous, then correspondingly, abundance flows from above. However, if the state below is one of sadness, then correspondingly, the flow of blessings is constricted. Therefore, the Rebbe said, serve Hashem with joy, because human joy and optimism draw a corresponding joy from above. This was the message of the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said it again and again and again. So I want to give a recap over here of the previous four, and then I'll summarize today's class. So in the first class of Positivity Bias, we spoke about, and by the way, this is the book, Positivity Bias. The author, his name is Mendel Kalmanson. And it's by, how do I do this? Ezra Press. An amazing book. There's many, many more stories, and you'll always be uplifted after reading the stories in this book. So it's called Practical Wisdom for Positive Living, inspired by the life and teachings of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So in the first class, what we spoke about is to recognize that in the situation we're in right now, and not just the situation that we're in with the pandemic, but every situation that we're in our lives, everything, including what's happening now, what happened over the weekend. We're not stuck. We're never stuck in a situation. Like the Rebbe told those who were in the airport and they thought they were stuck. A Jew is never stuck. Every situation that we're in, there's something to be learned. There's something to be gained. There's an education. There's an experience to be had over here. And we have the effect. We choose the effect that we're going to have on ourselves and others. The next class, in number 2, we spoke about positivity bias. The word bias, to recognize that we all have a bias, right? And our bias is, in general, leans to the negative. And it's a scientific thing. It shows that you could have 10 experiences, positive experiences in the day, or in the month, you could have hundreds of them and a few negative ones, and they pull us down, right? We get drawn to the negative experiences. And this is perhaps for good reasons, to protect us, in order to survive when we needed this. But in reality, we don't have to live like that. And we could train ourselves to see the positive. And in the third class, so for really the second one, we mentioned this idea to recognize that we have this bias. When you recognize you have the bias, when you recognize it's there, that's half the refuah, that's half the solution, half the remedy. The third one, we spoke about the idea of training yourself. And we have this ability to actually train ourselves. Like I spoke about the idea of if you're having a hard time waking up in the morning, the solution in the code of Jewish law is the 3 days in a row to right away get up right when you wake up without closing your eyes for another moment. And if you do that for 3 days in a row, that itself is going to help you change your whole way and being able to get up in the morning. So too is with negativity, is the more we do it, the more we train ourselves, it's like muscle memory, right? You could do something, for maybe many years ago, you used to do it, you used to enjoy doing it for years, you don't do it, you continue it again, you have muscle memory. So too is with positivity. The more we do it, even if at times we forget and we're not so good at it, we're strengthening our muscle, our mental muscle of positivity. And we do that by seeing the good in others and in every situation. And that was what the third class was focused on, is to always see the good in another person, always see the good in another situation. And this is really to stop for a moment over here, is that with everything going on right now, it's no different than everything else. There's extreme political sides of how to see what happened. The number one thing is to recognize that there was a loss of life. That was terrible. It's heart-wrenching to see the video of George Floyd being killed. It's saddening that someone could take the life of another person in such a way. And we should not forget that. Meaning that is number one, to recognize that what happened was not okay. And then with all the reactions, and it doesn't matter what side you're on, with what's happening. And one thing that we could all do is to see what you need to see. See what needs to be seen. And I'll share a story. The famous, I can't say, again, it's a well-known story of the Friediger Rebbe, the sixth Chabad Rebbe. When he was younger, he was 9 years old, he once asked his father, why do we have two eyes? Right, a young child, asking questions about everything in the world. And he says, why do we have two eyes? Why can we be like the minions? He didn't say that. With one eye, one eye, why do we have to have multiple eyes? Why do we need two eyes, right? And he even said, we have one mouth, one nose, two nostrils, but why do you have to have two eyes? Why is it so important? One eye, we could have seen everything. So his father, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab, he answers him and he said like this. He said, the reason you have two eyes is because the right eye is when you see the good in someone else, and the left eye is when you see the bad in someone else. And in general, in Kabbalah, it explains the right hand is to draw close, and the left hand is to push away. Meaning the right is the things that you should bring into your life, and the left are the things that you should push away. In general, that's the idea in Kabbalah. So meaning there's positive and negative. There's love and there's boundaries. Chesed and Gevura. So he said that when you see good in someone else, that you should embrace. But when you see the negative in another person, those are That's what you should push away. Our job in life is to push away the negative that we see in another person. So I just want to say that recognize that with everything going on right now, there's two ways of protesting. And when I say protesting, I mean protesting on both sides, and whatever opinion you have on this situation, and seeing the other person or others as being extreme. Just realize that we have the ability at all times to see. We could choose, and we could only see the negative, right? We could only see the negative in others. You could only look at others and say that this is extreme, and generalize and so on. Or we have the ability to see something positive, to see something good, to see a learning experience that we can have from this, right? How do we unite? It's a beautiful thing to see here in Flagstaff. When the mayor, Coral Evans, when she had a protest, really a gathering, and it was a beautiful thing, because on one hand, the message is being very, very clear that racism is not accepted, anti-Semitism is not accepted. We all believe in these ideas. Everyone agrees on those ideas. And at the same time, it's a message of love. There's a certain unity when people can come together. When you have both of those messages, when the message is very clear, and you could also at the same time, at the same moment, you recognize that the solution is love. The solution is being able to see how we're the same. The Rebbe always had this message. Whenever people came to the Rebbe said, we have to see our common denominator. It's so easy, and I think this is really what the message of Chabad has always been, and it's even more important today. We could get so caught up in our differences. It's so easy to get caught up in our differences. But the Rebbe always taught us to see our common good, see the common good in another person. When there were riots back many years ago in Crown Heights, and there was a lot of destruction, it was very difficult on the community. The Rebbe's approach to the politicians who came to the Rebbe at the time, the Rebbe always said that we're one people. When they tried saying, you and us, the Rebbe's approach, you can watch videos on YouTube, they've been circulating on Facebook and everything. The Rebbe's message was always, we're not two people. We're not two people that have to come together. We're all one. We're all one people. That was the Rebbe's message. And Dr. Laz, he was here a few months ago. He actually is an amazing human being. And he was there during the Crown Heights riots, and he's a person who is an amazing human being, and he's very close with the Black community, very close. And he's a rapper, and he has a band, and it's all Black musicians and himself, and he's done great things in the area of bringing communities together and educating, and he goes around the world and he speaks, and he spoke here in Flagstaff, and he shared a story. Again, this is Dr. Laz. There was a documentary or a series that was done on him called Crown Heights, where Howie Mandel plays his role, the role of Dr. Laz, so he shared a story when he was here, and it was on Shabbat day that he shared the story. And he shared the story where after the riots, there was a Jewish group. They came to the Rabbi, and they proposed that in Crown Heights, they wanted to put Jewish people who would stand on patrol, and they would have, I think they would even have weapons, and they would patrol the streets of Crown Heights. And the Rebbe, and they wanted the Rebbe's blessing, because they knew the only way that it would happen in Crown Heights is if the Rebbe gave his blessing. If the Rebbe didn't give his blessing, they wouldn't do this. And this wasn't a group from Crown Heights. I believe it was a group from somewhere else. And they were proposing, again, that they have these armed Jewish guards throughout the whole Crown Heights. And the Rebbe's response was that he will absolutely not support it. And they said, they were like, what do you mean? Why wouldn't you support it? Why not? Like, it's, how does the Rebbe expect, that there's ever going to be change, or that that things are going to change in our community? And the Rebbe's response was like this. The Rebbe said, if you want change, say hello to your neighbor. That was the Rebbe's response. And Dr. Laz said he was there when he heard this, and he was like shocked, like he didn't expect that the Rebbe, like this is the Rebbe's antidote to the problem. Say hello to your neighbor. But he realized what the Rebbe was saying, and he said to himself, look, he was living in Crown Heights at the time. He had many neighbors, Black neighbors who lived on his block, and they, you know, he had no connection with them. You know, it was just like, you know, in New York, you just, you know, walk by each other, don't acknowledge each other. And on that day, he realized that he's not going to do that anymore. On that day, he realized that he's going to make a change, and the change begins with himself. So the next day, he went ahead and he said something, you know, kind, you know, good morning to a neighbor, and then another neighbor, you know, something else, like little things. And he says, slowly but surely, this one, you know, was helping with the garbage, and this one was doing this, and then he had a Passover, and I think he did a Passover Seder, and he invited all his neighbors over to have a mock Seder before Passover, and he developed these amazing connections. And he said that it taught him such a powerful lesson, and that is, again, it's the same idea that we could blame others. We could always, you know, we need to do this, we need to take these extremes. The reality is that we could also change. Change comes from the inside. And like I said earlier, what we spoke about tonight is the idea of the observer today is the observer effect, right? The observer effect is the way you observe. If you look at another person, you look at them with contempt, there's going to be divide between you. If you look at another person and you could see good in them, there's going to be unity. So if we look at the world today, look at the world today, and we woke up today, I could almost guarantee we all woke up today, and we said this world is crazy. We had COVID-19, and now we have this, and is it ever going to end? And then we're upset. Either we're upset at this side or upset at that side. And the truth is, just realize for a moment, has that ever gotten anywhere to a positive place, right? Think about even a simple relationship. Has this feeling inside of you of divide or anger, has it ever brought two people closer to each other? Now imagine the world. If our perception of the world is that the world is a jungle and the world is crazy and the world is ever going to, are we ever going to fix these problems? The reality is that the world is going to continue to be in that way. But the more we ourselves change ourselves and the people around us, and it's, again, it starts, change that I've always said starts from ourselves, from in our own home, our own blocks, our own neighborhoods. If we could just be more positive and realize that, you know what, maybe I am judgmental. Maybe I have, you know, the Baal Shem Tov would always say about, you know, if you see something negative in someone else, realize you have a little bit of it in yourself, and that's why it bothers you so much. Maybe I have a little racism in me that I could get rid of. Maybe I do have a bias, right? Maybe I am judgmental of other people in ways that I shouldn't be. That's a healthy approach to this whole situation. And again, it doesn't mean we can't have opinions. It doesn't mean that we can't be upset. You know, it's understandable, and there's much room for discussion. I wish that we actually lived in a time that we could have open discussions with each other. People could talk and still respect each other, even though they have such extreme different views. And the truth is, I believe that we could. But in general, we always keep politics out of the synagogue because we know that it could actually push people away. And this is one of the reasons why we say no politics in the synagogue, because we want to find our common denominator. That's why here at Chabad, you could be one extreme, you could be the other extreme, you could be somewhere in the middle, and it doesn't matter. We could all come together and be a loving, wonderful family, because that is life. That's the way it is. It's the way what we choose to focus on. That we could have so many things different. That I've also spoken about this idea that I've always said that people think that, you know, what it means, you know, the melting pot of America is to shed your identity, right? So like, I have no identity anymore. That I've always said, no, just the opposite. You should have your identity. I should have my identity. And yet we should be able to respect one another, right? You don't have to say, you know, oh, I'm, not be proud of your Judaism in order to embrace everyone else. No, you can be extremely proud of your Judaism, but also extremely proud of someone else's heritage, to be able to truly understand them, even when at times it's difficult. So I think that's just a message to walk away with today. It's all about what we choose to focus on. If we choose to focus on the positivity, we're going to bring more positivity into our lives and into the world around us. So thank you all for joining for this course. We'll keep you updated if there's something else in the pipeline. And I want to thank you again for taking time out of your days, these Tuesdays, to join and be a part of this, because it wouldn't, if I was just talking to my own computer here, it wouldn't be any fun. So thank you for being a part of this. And
Thank you.
Thank you. Avi, Avi, it's so nice to have you here.
You know, I was in the car, so I couldn't do the video, and I just had to hear you, and it's good to see you.
Thank
And
you.
you know, by accident, I checked my email. I'm like, oh man, it's 5 minutes. Okay, so it was I'm glad to join.
Wonderful. Yes, sir. Thank you very much. How are you and how are you doing? And Michelle, you're doing well?
Yeah, thank you. We're doing well. You know, we're staying in New River right now. We're basically just came back from the city, from Scottsdale area, but yeah, just not much in California as far as work goes, and with all the balagan, we're just gonna pray, hope for the best for all of us.
Yes, amen, amen. And I can't wait to see you guys again soon.
Definitely.
When we reopen again. We miss you.
Yeah, as soon as you guys reopen, I'm bringing the Airstream for Shabbat. So yeah, you tell me when.
Okay. Okay.
Excellent.
Well,
thank you all. Yeah.
Yeah, please send my best, Michelle.
Will do. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, Ivy, thank you so much. Thank you for being a part of this.
Yes, I'm gonna put it on my calendar.
What?
More weeks or one more week?
No, this is it. This was the last week for this course, for this class. So, but God willing, we'll see. We'll see what we can do.
I just have to put on my work calendar.
I mean, it's been great. It's been great that we could continue this, and it also goes on YouTube. So if you ever want to see the first few, there were we've gotten a lot of great feedback. So.
Oh, good.
Thank you. I have to run because I have a 2 o'clock meeting that just showed up. But thank you for being here, Ivy. We hopefully soon we could get back together. We need to talk.
I was thinking the same. One of these days, I have a 2 o'clock meeting also. So yes, I have to just get it scheduled. Busy.
Thank you. Take care, Ivy, and we'll see you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Okay, bye, Margaret. Bye, Judy.
Bye, Rabbi. Thank you so much.
Thank you.